Well, greetings once again, wherever in the world you're joining us. My name is Faith Abiodun. I have the privilege of serving as Executive Director at UWC International, and I am really thrilled to welcome you along for the second plenary session in the pre-Congress journey leading towards the 2024 UWC International Congress, holding in Phuket, Thailand, and online from the 29th of February to the 2nd of March, 2024. Congress, as you might remember, for those who were part of the first plenary session, comes around once every 6 years if you can afford it. The last time we had this was in 2016, and because of COVID, we are delayed by at least a year. But we're very excited to be bringing together the entire UWC community, our teachers, our students, our heads of schools, members of the UWC family from all over the world, lots of our alumni, our partners as well. We're going to be really engaging on the subject of education as a force. That statement itself is adapted from the UWC mission statement, which says that UWC makes education a force to unite people, nations, and cultures for peace and a sustainable future. Now, we are almost halfway through our pre-Congress journey, and this plenary session allows us to bring together all members of the movement who have been part of this journey so far. And it's a chance for us to zoom out a little bit from the conversations that we have been having. Now, if you've been on this journey with us, you would remember that we are broken down into 5 various tracks through which we are having this conversation. And we've now had 2 track-specific sessions leading towards this. There are lots of highlights to reflect from all of those sessions. The discussions have really ranged around the future of curriculum, teaching and learning in UWC and around the world. We've looked into subjects of well-being across all of our schools. We've looked into our admissions process. We've looked into financial sustainability, and now we've also looked into educational leadership and partnerships. And through all of these conversations, what we are doing is to really build the ground for shared understanding across the UWC movement. But what it is that we currently do very, very well today, what are the areas for further investment, who are the partners around the world who are doing similar things to us from whom we can learn, and what does the future really look like for us? And in this plenary session today, we're looking at the overall subject of paradigm shifts for systems transformation. Thankfully, we have a panel of experts and leaders who will take us through that conversation, really unpack these key terms and what they mean. In terms of our engagement today, we're inviting you to use the chat very actively with each other, share where in the world it is that you're joining us from, share some terms about your actual engagement with the UWC movement, and then use the Q&A button to ask questions that might go directly to our panelists or questions that members of our team can answer on your behalf. So please use the chat to engage with each other and use the Q&A section to engage, to pose questions for our panelists. Today, our moderator is Dr. Vivian Feng, who is an alumna of UWC Adriatic, more importantly as well for us, a member of the UWC International Council and a member of the working group planning the UWC International Congress. Vivian is a chemistry professor and assistant director at the Center for Science and Technology at Princeton University. So Vivian wears multiple hats, and as well, in context of this conversation, Vivian is a systems thinker. And so it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the moderator for today's session. Vivian, over to you.
Thank you so much, Faith. Greetings, everyone. It's my pleasure to be moderating today's plenary with a great panel of speakers on this exciting topic of paradigm shift for systems transformation, a topic that's very close to my heart as an educator. The world has been described as being in a state of polycrisis, an unprecedented convergence of political, social, economic, and ecological instability. All over the world, we're confronted by the pace of technological advancements, growing distrust in public institutions, and the rise of disinformation and intolerance. If the challenges facing the world today are interconnected, many of us educators have been asking the question, then how can we think and redesign the educational paradigm of today to adequately equip future generations with the skills and competencies to thrive in an ever-changing world tomorrow? So I hope today's plenary offers a platform to exchange some ideas and visions. As someone working in STEM education in higher ed, I was asked to share a little bit from my corner of the world about our approaches to interdisciplinary STEM education. My research background is in a highly interdisciplinary field of studying the environmental impact of engineered nanomaterials. I have always enjoyed working with people with diverse technical background who contribute to solutions with their own unique strengths. I want to share this perspective with my students in my classroom. So in one of my freshman seminar courses, Technology and the Environment, students are exposed to not only the technical aspects of solar panels, micronutrients for crop growth, or learning about oxidation reaction in water disinfection for water treatment, but also engage in social scientific debates and learn to use data visualization tools and use their artistic talent for environmental storytelling. We want students to develop areas of expertise, yet appreciate different disciplinary lenses and can connect and transcend individual discipline. We call this work silo busting. That's why I'm super excited to engage in this conversation of system approaches to reimagine a new educational paradigm, especially within the UWC movement. Now, let me introduce our speakers today. Dr. Lee Howell is the executive director of the Villas Institute, a platform for systemic changes and intergenerational collaborations. Lee has worked at the World Economic Forum, also teaches at University of Geneva, and serves on the board at the IB. Next, we have Fidelis Ntenga. Fidelis is the director of curriculum development at the IB. She came with years of experience of developing school improvement strategy for IB World Schools. From the UWC schools, we have Maria Dang, the vice principal for learning and innovation at UWC Atlantic. Maria has previously led the development of the Climate Action Leadership Diploma at UWC Pearson and was one of the designers of the Mahindra project-based diploma at UWC Mahindra. Last but not least, we have Kathy Jones. Kathy is the head of UWC Southeast Asia East Campus. She came with a variety of teaching and leadership experience at various educational levels in China, New Zealand, South Africa, and England. Welcome all. So let's get this started. My first question is directed to Lee. Given the complexity, interconnectedness, and systematic challenges that we face today, the term systems transformation is increasingly used to describe what is needed to achieve sustainable development in the world. So can you share with us what exactly is systems transformation and why is it important that we look to the future?
Thanks, Vivian, and thanks for the introduction and context setting. And it's great to be among really like-minded, like-hearted people on this panel. I'd like to just break it down a bit. I think the people here that are part of the UWC movement are pretty familiar with the notion of being a global citizen and obviously that we share one planet. But I think what's maybe novel or becoming more real because of the notion of this polycrisis is that the interdependent and I would say interrelated nature of the world, it's forcing us to think about the world as a complex system, actually, that we live in a complex system and have to be able to operate in a way, shape that system. And I think that's the point of departure, because if you are being exposed or informed about a number of systemic challenges, let's say climate change is the one that we're very familiar with, I think. But without systems thinking, you can imagine a young person is likely to respond without understanding systems or with a sense of anxiety, perhaps anger. It might, or worse, manifest itself as apathy. And what I think we're looking for as educators, I believe, is that we need to bring them and give them a sense of agency, that the response to these big complex challenges require agency. More importantly, and you made a great point, all of these challenges, the systemic challenges that we're talking about are interdisciplinary. They're actually interdisciplinary problems, but I would go one step further and argue that they require intergenerational solutions. So it's not going to be just us, but it's going to be the, the next generation. If you take the energy transition or what's needed in the food systems, it's certainly we in our positions today are going to start this, but we'll catalyze things. But obviously the future is really owned by our students and their children and grandchildren, right? So we have to think of this intergenerationally, which is unusual. So when I approach to systems transformation, I think there's a sense that multiple systems, and again, systems are a set of things that are interrelated. They could be a set of principles or processes, but they share a common purpose. And there's a sense that they're not fit for purpose, that the system is no longer fit for purpose and therefore requires some way of some sort of intervention. There, I would say, before we get there, though, I think we need to introduce, again, systems thinking. We need to help our students and our faculty connect the dots. Sense making is so important. I don't want to diminish that. I mean, without that element, and also purpose shaping. Those are all the elements we need if we want to transform a system and exercise a different form of leadership, but systems leadership, which is really about more EQ than IQ. How do we collaborate when we don't know? No single entity has the actual authority to change the system. How do we work with others and other stakeholders to really share narrative, share a common purpose, to redirect the purpose of the system and transforming? So those are the elements when I think about systems, systemic transformation. But I think the one where we also need to think about carefully is that, and I think, in your field in particular, these are not, complex systems mean nonlinear. We have to approach this in the sense that some small things will have a very small or slight impact, and some small things may have a very big impact when we're talking about systemic transformation. Then the rate of change, we need to think it's again nonlinear. It's might be exponential. When we're talking about artificial intelligence or some of the other areas, I mean, we don't really know where we are on the curve, but it's in a way we're factoring the fact that this probably be more of an exponential phenomenon. I think those are the elements, and I guess the key in maybe kicking off the debate within the panel is, if we recognize these elements, and we recognize we need to go and introduce more systems thinking, cultivate and develop systems leaders in order to enable the systems transformation, the systemic transformation, because of the fact that we think these systems are not fit for purpose, the food system, a mobility system, pick one. Then how do we go from some of this being extracurricular in a way, because people have little projects, into becoming, in our instance, we're not a school, we're institute, but we're co-curricular. We're trying to figure out a way that how we can advance your points about data visualization, narrative building, just general systems thinking and finding, understanding adaptive problems and such. How can we help institutions that are trying to bring that into the curriculum, like, as we have on the panel, UWC Atlantic? So I think that's where, I come at it from, is that, yes, we're in a period of, we want systemic transformation. We need to unpack that, realize first, we ourselves are living in a complex system, and we need to understand how complex systems behave. Secondly, we need to identify where in our education system we can actually go from anxiety to ambition by introducing a sense of agency. And that agency has to foster the skills, and I think primary systems thinking, but also systems leadership, which is an entirely different form of leadership, I think, outside of the UW movement. I think within the UW, I think you will understand it's intuitive in how you approach stakeholders and such, but for most organizations, they don't really factor that in. And then lastly, to 2 points, your point about interdisciplinary approaches or diversity of thinking is required, and lastly, a sense of an intergenerational ownership of the solution is also very important if we want to really advance or catalyze systemic transformations across all the systems we care about.
Thank you so much, Lee. That was a lot to think about. I'm already thinking about how the UWC is uniquely positioned to help answer some of those questions, because the students are exposed to everybody, to people from all over the world. So it is a good place for us to really consider this interconnectedness, and to take this to go from challenge or from anxiety to agency. I really like the way you framed that. Thank you, Lee. So my second question is directed at Fidelis. So IB is a massive educational system serving almost 2 million students in public, private, and international schools in 159 countries. IB is currently taking a systemic approach to reviewing its programs, especially the diploma program, in light of some of the major shifts in the world. So what are some of the big questions that are driving the IB's approach to curriculum reform?
Thank you, Vivian. And if we go back to the beginnings of the UWC and the beginning of the IB, we know that there was a purpose why both the United World Colleges and the IB set into education. And I think we are facing similar challenges in the world we live in. And therefore, the purpose of our being in education is more relevant than it has ever been in the last over 55 years that we have been as organizations in this field of education. If we think about the complexities that Lee just spoke about and the complexities that we are all faced with, I think education as a tool to create a better world and more peaceful world, and as a force to reckon with, becomes more and more relevant. The kind of big questions right now for the IB, and which I believe should be big questions for any education system in the world, is education still serving the purpose of evolving our lives? How do we know what is relevant to be educating for? How is education going to look like in the future? And what is a future-ready education? And if education is not serving the purpose that we have envisaged to serve, what should we be doing? And therefore, some of the big questions are, what is the kind of education that we need to be creating for our young people so that we can facilitate them in living in harmony with each other and with the planet, and flourishing and fully engaging with the community and the society? And there is a slogan often I see with young people that always calls upon the IB: make it cool again. We want to have fun. We want to enjoy going to school. And how do you see a school? Does it still have the healthy learning activity that it was envisaged for? So there are a lot of questions, especially for us as educators. And in that perspective, the IB really has looked at our educational offer, not just for the 16 plus age, but also across from 3 years of age. And we have taken the approach of continuous improvement in addressing the different components of our educational offer, whether it's in the early years, the primary years, or the middle years, but also a holistic systemic approach into reviewing our education program that was set like over 50 years ago. Is it still relevant? Do we need to be making significant changes? Absolutely. If you imagine the kind of an education system we went through, we cannot be offering the same education system for our children today, for the young people, even for our educators who engage with these educational offers. And therefore, the IB, guided by 7 key principles, is reviewing holistically the program of educational offer for our high school children. And for the purpose of this conversation, I will focus on 2 of them. And 2 of these that I want to talk about are designing an educational offer that is more flexible to ensure that children, young people, have flexible learning pathways, and also an educational offer that is adaptable within different education systems. Because the IB designs an education not to be offered in only one country, but as you've mentioned, in so many countries. So it's really an education for the world. And how do we ensure that it is flexible enough to be implemented within different contexts and different education systems? If we have to bring that influence, we want to see really having an education that is future ready. and that is going to empower our young people to be able to navigate the complex world, the uncertain world that they will be living in, ensuring that they are well facilitated to flourish in the world and live in harmony with the shared guardianship of the planet. Apart from flexibility, I will also talk about the innovative assessment. But while still on that flexibility, there are huge tensions there because we would also want to have individualized learning experiences for these children. So how do you balance between personalization, manageability by schools, and even the possibility of implementing this kind of an education or offer in highly regulated education systems? Because we would like to have an educational offer that is not limiting, that is accessible to those children, whether they are highly represented, underrepresented, not represented. An educational system that can really facilitate our young people to flourish in this world. So we have those tensions, as well as ensuring that it is recognized by higher institutions of learning, because we also do not want to hinder the kids from progressing further in their learning pathways, as well as joining the world of work. So we have that tension there. And related to that, we are also focusing on innovative assessment design. The beauty of designing an IB education is an end-to-end design. We do not only design the curriculum, but we ensure that while designing the curriculum, we also design how we are going to assess. And therefore, we are focusing on multimodal approaches to evidencing learning, other forms of evidencing assessment. And assessment is not a challenge only for the IB. It's a global challenge. How do you assess meaningfully? What is it that we value that we should be assessing? How about digital assessment? And how do we ensure that that kind of digital assessment is accessible to everyone, to all the children in the different countries that may be engaging with an IB education? So we have big challenges, we have questions, and therefore, because we love to co-create with our IB ecosystem, and we like to co-create with our different stakeholders, we are at that stage where we are piloting. 2 of our UWCs are part of this piloting program. We are at the stage of prototyping, testing, and that will inform further redesign of the 16+ educational offer, because we are committed to bringing about this paradigm shift for the main actors in an education system that is future fit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fidelis. That was so inspiring. I have so many questions as you were talking. I'm sure our audience do too, and we'll get to some of them soon. And so let me direct my next question back to Lee. Lee, given the need to prepare young people to thrive in a rapidly changing world, what are the dominant educational paradigms that need to change today in order to further align the educational experiences of young people to the needs of the world?
Thanks, Vivian. As a parent, that's something that's also a very tough question. And also, obviously, I'm teaching at the university. One thing I think it goes back to Fidelis' point. I think we also should consider, we're so hung up on secondary education about thinking about getting everyone into tertiary education. And I think we should be also acknowledge that we should be graduating people through the programs, the IB program, that are really ready to make a difference the day they leave us, right? I think a bit of that path dependency has created a lot of tension on both ends. I see it. I mean, the university saying, we need sort of these skill sets, but not really actually encouraging that and rewarding those schools. And particularly if you think about progressive sort of pioneering schools like in the UWC movement, how is that syncing up? I think that's one area. I just put that on the table. Now, in terms of the pedagogy, I do think we should start to teach in a way that I mentioned agency, that actually introduces agency, but also engenders a bias for action for these young people. I think we could do more in really getting young people into an entrepreneurial mindset. I'm at the business school, but I think more and more people are not looking for management principles. They're trying to understand how they can go and scale and introduce solutions to what they see are unmet needs. And I think we see a lot of interesting learning in labs and things that are happening, maker lab, design labs, in a way that's sort of the first step towards that kind of entrepreneurial mindset that I think is needed. Because again, it goes back to the premise that our generation may own the challenge, problems, but our students are going to own the solutions, right? And the sooner we can accelerate that, bring that forward, not just the agency, but this sort of bias for action, this entrepreneurialism by maybe project-based learning, distributed learning. There's many schools of thought around this, so I won't get into them. But I do think the idea for me is that we can, in a way, in the classroom, get young people to fall in love with these problems, fundamentally, right? Because if they do, they're on the right path, and we've seen it. And Vivian, you teach in the STEM side. I mean, your colleagues, they're not searching for a solution, but they really did fall in love with that problem, and they really realized the value of addressing that problem. And it took many, I'm sure it was a labor of love because of all the failures and the headwinds they faced. But we're going to need that bit of grit, particularly from this generation. At the same time, being very cognizant, I think some of the questions about their mental health and well-being. So this transition from anxiety to ambition, we have to be, I would say, aspirational but not naive. We need to be critical but not cynical when we're talking about these systems that we want to change. But I do think there was a comment about arts and the humanities. I do think in order for this to work, we have to think, feel, and act. It's not about thinking, the evidence-based, the science, and acting, as I mentioned, entrepreneurs. There's a feeling piece, and we need to actually, kind of revisit how we can get people to feel that emotional gain and loss that will actually get them to not only think about something, but really take action. And there, I think we need to sort of, revisit the role of the arts and humanities in this piece as well. And I think many of the schools in the UWC movement, obviously embrace that. IB and others also have some elements, but there's some tensions, right? How do we really do it and sort of sync it up? That requires our own systems thinking, I believe, and really making sure these things fit together more holistically in an integrated way.
Thank you. I really resonated with what you said about getting students to fall in love with the problems. That's we usually think of problems are negative, but actually view them as a challenge and as the sense of agency. I really appreciate that. One of my mentors told me that any job that you get is to solve someone's problem. So the question is whose problem you want to solve. And I think this resonates a lot with what you just said. Thank you, Lee. So let me direct the next question back to Fidelis. As you continue to lead curriculum development and education reform within the IB, how do you currently collaborate, and how do you seek to collaborate further with partners, including school leaders, teachers, and industry practitioners in shaping the future of learning?
Thank you, Vivian. And probably those in the webinar will know that the IB is one of the most collaborative organizations in curriculum development and curriculum reviews. And we go through a cycle of evolving our programs to confirm that they are still relevant and they remain relevant and addressing the current needs and trends in education. So how we collaborate, we have different classifications of the people we collaborate with or the stakeholders we collaborate with. We co-create extensively with our schools, with IB schools. We see our IB schools as our partners in education. And there are a great number of schools that participate in piloting some of the prototypes, piloting some of the components that we may be trialing at any given time. So the curriculum development cycle involves an extended period of time where we do a research based on the current trends in education. We collect evidence from the users who are our schools and students, and most importantly, in our current curriculum design, which we've not done so well in the past, which we are doing now, is actually involving the students themselves and our alumni. Because sometimes we spend a lot of time sitting in rooms making decisions for people without involving the people, without bringing them into the fold. And just extending on what Dr. Lee just said, think about the agency that is involved in driving people's learning. What is it that we think is fit for our learners? Is that what they envisage to be fit for them to be learning? And therefore, we also collaborate with our own students in designing our curriculum and reviewing our programs. Apart from collaborating with our school ecosystem, the schools, the teachers, consultants, IB educators, we also tap into other thought leaders in education who have become our main collaborators, because the IB is not the only thought leader in education. We bring in other organizations. We research with them, we co-create, we go through different research in trends in education with them, and that informs also our curriculum development. I could pick a few of them. We work very closely with the OECD. We have been also working closely with UNESCO, and we pick other thought leaders in education that we collaborate with. In fact, lately we have set up a curriculum development collaboration unit that is outward facing, that brings in other perspectives in curriculum development from other thought leaders in education, and also brings out IB's perspectives on curriculum design and development. And that keeps us informed as a curriculum development team to ensure that different perspectives are brought in our curriculum development. We also work with individuals who are experts in different areas. Here we are talking about systems thinking. We are in the process actually of getting into collaboration with the Villas Institute. So we also work with experts in different areas that will inform our curriculum development. We also work extensively with professors and researchers in the different fields. If it is early years we are talking about, we also collaborate with specialists in that area. If it is the high school qualification, the diploma, we also collaborate with experts, individuals, experts in different areas, and breaking it down further, even to subject level. Mathematics. If we are reviewing the curriculum in mathematics, we will look out for experts, thought leaders in that particular field. So we do not only take a holistic programmatic approach, but we also drill it down to the level of different components of each of the programs and ensure that we bring this in. Once all this is put into the fold, then we pilot with our schools. And then we get further feedback from that piloting, and then we launch it. So we try to bring in as much as possible, because we believe that IB curriculum and assessment is meant to develop the internationally minded people who care for having a shared guardianship of the planet.
Thank you, Fidelis. I can tell this is such a major effort that involves so many people, so many organizations, and I'm really looking forward. This is something that I think IB, we all agree that we're, as an alum, my own IB education has benefited me significantly, and I can only imagine what you guys are doing is only going to strengthen the system and benefit future students. So I want to thank you and Lee for answering some of our questions to get our conversation going. And thank you for partnering with UWC on this journey. And now let's direct some of our attention to some of the audience questions that have come in. And since I have Fidelis on the screen, the first question, I'll take the first question to Fidelis. So speaking of agency and urgency, the world is changing faster than we've been able to implement changes in our educational system. How can the IB and UWC remain relevant in the fast-pacing world?
I think we have to model what we talk about, and we have to make ourselves vulnerable to engage with not climate change, but systems change in realizing some of the complex challenges that we are faced with. So both the IB and the United World Colleges, we must model what we are talking about. Our own students who graduate, our own alumni who graduate through our programs and through our schools, keep on calling upon us to go out there. Sometimes it's difficult to give a certain positionality, but if we actually live the lifelong learning, if we are humble enough to appreciate that we are no one is an expert in anything. We are all students in this venture. If we are humble enough to realize that and remain the long life learners that we claim to be, then we need to engage with what we don't know, what we don't necessarily have answers for, and make ourselves vulnerable out there and engage with others to come up with solutions. Because we are living in a complex world, we have to venture and explore complexity together, and we do not have to have the right answers. Our positionality could change from one day to the next, could change. We need to have that adaptive solving approach. We have new information, we change our positionality. We keep on updating and upgrading our positionality as two organizations because we are not the experts in anything. We have to appreciate that we are a student as well.
That's so well said. Yeah, this mindset of lifelong learners. We need to model that to teach that to our students. Thank you. That's a great perspective. I'll direct the next question to Lee. So UWC was once among the founders of the IB, fundamentally influencing international education. How can UWC move from reflecting on its own system change to positively influencing education globally for real changes? Wow. So there are two additional points.
Yeah.
I'll get to. Yeah, you can get started first.
Thanks. But I just want to underline Fidelis's point about lifelong learning. These are all going to be novel problems, right? I mean, we're talking about, take the food system alone, which is a third of climate. It's the biggest use of water, land use. You know, this will require behavioral change and on all of us. So I really just want to double underline when it comes to systemic transformation. It's that understand that we're all going to go through a lifelong learning process and that these are adaptive problems that require novel solutions. If we don't start there, it's very difficult, I think. And so I just want to just underscore that. Now, to your question, how do you stay, in a way, yeah, of course, you're very successful. All organizations are successful, and after 50 years and a great track record. And there's always that test of really the relevance going forward. And I think part of it is kind of going back to the future. There was a particular global context from which both the IB and the United World College movement were born out of. You could also argue then that there are a set of there wasn't quite maybe as, you know, there were some big existential problems and crises we're facing right in that period of time. So I do think there is a need often to obviously recontextualize and sort of look at the mission again and say, okay, well, where are we at the state of the world? More importantly, where should the world be? And I think that's the big difference. There has to be a normative piece to this. There has to be something like, okay, the world is here. Where do we want the world to be? And then what's that narrative that will not just bring on, this is the new part. It can't be, it's got to be a campaign, a narrative. And by the way, narrative, I mean, not, where everybody's a protagonist, right? Where the story, we're not a protagonist. We know this from the beginning to the end, but a narrative, we can invite others to shape the ending or the future. And I think the change here would be that UWC has a narrative that, of course, speaks to its schools and to the IB, but also to the broader world. And it should be a normative one, an aspirational one, but rounded in sort of science and rounded really, in really the diversity of knowledge that we celebrate and the sense of global citizenship. But I do think there is an opportunity for the institution, the UWC movement, to develop that narrative in a very important time when people are looking for something to guide them and something to be a part of, where again, narrative also gives you agency because you say, oh, I agree and I want to do something to contribute to that. So I think that would be where I would put to the energy, is to think of that narrative that not only resonates within UWC, the IB, but also really to educators and systems around the world. And I think it's very doable and very necessary.
Thank you. That's a really good reminder. So next audience question is directed to Fidelis, someone who's clearly very excited about assessment, and that's actually something I resonate with. Regarding assessment, I'm so happy to hear the focus on assessment shift away from GPA to allow for alternative path. How can we, or IB, motivate students to do their best while also allowing for different career choices like professional trades, community colleges, and really empower for entrepreneurship? Every job is a climate job by now.
Absolutely.
This is a great question.
First of all, I think this is a great question, not only for the IB, but for the United World Colleges. You know, we have so much power in influencing the direction of travel for assessment. And I know later on, Maria is going to talk about the different approach that we are taking with the pilot in terms of assessment. And if you think about the origins of the United World Colleges and the IB and look at where we are today and the level of influence that we could have jointly in terms of shaping assessment, do we assess what we value? And what is meaningful assessment, really? And you can imagine if we take those risks and we are courageous enough to have multimodal approach to assessment, we can only start counting who are going to follow. But it is risky. We need to be courageous. We need to be brave, because this also involves young people's future. And it's about really trying to influence as many actors as possible in the field of education to have that paradigm shift. And as we continue doing that, we take the courage to move forward with different ways of assessing. How do you evidence learning? Is it through sitting in a 2 hours paper? I mean, how do you define a child's learning experience with 1 grade or a number? You know, I think the United World Colleges and the IB have the upper hand in actually driving a different direction of travel in assessment, and we can do it. And as an organization committed as we are in the partnership we have with the UWCs, I think there will be a shift, and we will live to see this. I think so. I will leave the rest for the United World College colleagues who will talk about the multimodal approach to assessments that we are piloting.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear that. There are actually 2 additional questions that came in the chat as well as follow up to this. So Lee, feel free to chime in as well. So IB is a challenging program that leads to competitive environment. Is the alignment of the curriculum system of IB in the first place? And what do you think are the best strategies to adjust this in such environment? So these are exactly.
Let Fidelis correct me, but I'll give you my view as a member of the board of the trustees of the IB. Sort of stepping back for a moment, I think it's the questioner asks, it's a challenging program, and I think all challenging programs, in a way, help prepare people to work actually, and to really, and that's the one difference. You know, I teach undergraduates and graduate students at the University of Geneva, and I'm often, you know, I don't want to be the poster child marketing person, but of course, often, you know, my best students who enjoy this sort of inquiry-based approach of learning and also the project learning often come from, an IB background. And I think going back to first sort of principles, we're saying we know it's very important to be interdisciplinary. It's very important to be global in your mindset. That's just to be aware of the global situation, but then contextualize it locally. So that's where your agency really kicks in, I think. And the way I think it's set up and the sort of requirements, everything from the theory of knowledge, but also to the projects and the service and the language, I think in reality, as a parent, I think of it, and my kids are yet to go into that program, but as an educator, I think it's done a really great job of really preparing young people to be great global citizens. Again, before they even get to the university level, and this is what I really want to sort of highlight again. I think we have the capacity, we ought to, be comfortable with the fact that we're helping, and there was a question about trades and things, but we're really helping any young person to feel that they can leave and be productive in the world. Because what's interesting that I see is the impatience. I think some young people won't wait for 4 years in the university to figure out what they want to do. I know, and we see that, the famous technology stories, it's always about X and Y dropping out of certain universities to do their startups because they couldn't, wait for the university to get things going. I think that's great because we have so many challenges today that requires not only curiosity and ambition, but some impatience. And so, I look at it as something where if we can get people really wanting to, again, this bias to action, and if the system, the IB program makes you comfortable with doing different things on pretty demanding deadlines, but still getting things done that will really, I think, are all positives. I think the key is to think about, resilience and the fact that we do live in a different age of media and social media that's very different from our lived experience and all the other issues that sort of form the narrative around the poly crisis. So we do have to take that in mind. And let's not forget COVID. This is a generation that's just coming out of that. We don't even really understand the impact of that, and it'll take some time to even assess that. So I think those are also very important considerations in terms of sort of more holistic approach, in terms of preparing the next generation of leaders.
I was just going to add a bit. One of the things, I only talked about 2 guiding principles in our 16+ review, and I said there are 7 of them. Other 2, one of them is with the well-being in mind. We're also designing with that, and with subtraction in mind. Again, talking about humility, we have to be humble enough to take away from what we've been piling. And something important that Lee has mentioned is the fact that you also want to have the young people to have the appropriate challenge. Yes, it's a challenging program, but what is the appropriate challenge? I think with the design of with flexibility in mind, it ensures that schools are at liberty to make it as challenging as they can for the kind of children, the profile that they have in their schools, while in other contexts, they do not need it to make it that complex. But talking about paradigm shifts, I think we need also a major paradigm shift with the teachers, because we may design for subtraction, but if teachers have done it in a certain way, unless they have had that paradigm shift, then we are going to be faced with similar challenges. It's a matter of having a paradigm shift for all the actors in the learning experiences for our children. It's not only one party, it is all of us, the paradigm shift. So subtraction, less can be more meaningful. And children need to have fun when they are going to school, and they need to enjoy schooling.
Excellent point. The question is, how do we make it fun? How do we turn those challenges into fun? That's a great reminder. There is actually a follow-up question to this stream of conversation. So adding to this, in the context of IB, students may offer prioritized performance and achieving high marks over genuine learning. And I can resonate that we see this in higher ed as well, not only within the IB. How can we proactively address this and shift educational focus towards a more holistic emphasis on personal growth? This is an excellent question, and I want to hear how you guys think of this.
I can start and Lee probably feel free to come in. Authentic learning, the learning experience is more meaningful than the final grade that children graduate with. I wonder who of you in your workplaces are ever asked, how many points did you graduate with from the diploma? No, who is ever asked that? And we probably talk about the experiences that we had, the learning experience, and how we grew. I mean, if you think about the children who joined the United World Colleges, they join at a certain age. By the time they graduate from the United World Colleges, the kind of growth that those kids have experienced within the 2 years or 24 months they've been in that college is amazing. So it's the authentic learning experience is more meaningful. And we are asking, how can we change to give this more focus? It is all of us who are stakeholders in education. I talked about the teachers. If the teachers do not have it, the kids are not going to benefit from it. If you have school leadership that does not create an environment for those in their schools to have a thriving experience, a flourishing experience, to have this kind of mindset, then the human beings in that school would not experience it. It is an effort for all of us in education to bring about this shift.
I mean, I would just underscore what Fidela said. Maybe one thing, when I think about my students, is they can learn they can acquire knowledge and information more easily than any other cohort, right? Because if you think about it, the biggest education platform today is probably YouTube, right? You just type in whatever. I mean, every minute there's 700 hours of YouTube videos being uploaded, just to put that in the back of your head. And of course, the search engines are now optimized to discover that. And then on top of that layer, we probably have the generative AI, and that's another session that will, give us very plausible answers, but not necessarily correct ones. So I think learning for us, what we should focus on, of course, and I would just say it's a human experience, it's a community experience, but also how to think. And I think that's what IB does very well, is how to really, right, the theory of knowledge piece is so important. It's going to become more important as we go forward, as we start to see every profession will somehow coexist or work with these tools, particularly generative AI, and to be able to sort of evaluate that. There's so many other bigger issues too around open science, et cetera. We can go on, but I think the fundamental one is making sure that at the end of the day, people know how to think. Now, without the grades, I would also argue that in science, but also in entrepreneurship, you fail more than you win. And that's a learning is itself, right? I mean, that's an experience that we all go through. And I say that now I'll speak as a parent. I probably do a disservice because my whole point is I want very resilient, very strong kids, but at the same time, I'm just afraid of them ever failing or ever running into any sort of hardship in that journey. And I'm like, well, I need to sort of step back myself, right? And look at that and say, wait, what's going on here? Because in reality, we know that it is not about the gate, it's experience the journey. It's not, and not the destination per se. So, I think we all need to sort of internalize that, and as teachers, as parents, as uncles, whatever, but, and reinforce that message that you're going to have there. It's important to dare, and it's important to accept that it's not always going to work out. But that's the deal, right? If you don't dare, you don't get to where you want to be, and the world won't get to be a better place.
Thank you for that great reminder. So thank you both, and thank you for the audience questions. So for the next stage of this plenary, we'd like to take the opportunity to highlight some exciting curriculum innovations within our UWC schools, as Fidelis has hinted at. So UWC Atlantic and UWC Southeast Asia are both engaged in adopting a new curriculum, the system transformation pathway. So I'd like to invite first Maria from UWC Atlantic and then Kathy from UWC Southeast Asia to share with us a bit about their approaches.
Thank you so much. Vivian, and what a treat to be amongst friends on this panel today, and also in the virtual company of so many more from across the movement. If I can just ask our colleagues at the International Office to pull out some visual aids as I talk you through the way that we approach our work in systems transformation and in learning innovation at UWC Atlantic. And for us, that really begins with these two Venn diagrams. The one on the left comes to us from Vanessa Andriotti, who really I would like to lift up as one of the most important educational thinkers in the world right now. And it shows the fundamentally interconnected nature of ecological and social harm as a consequence of unjust systems, of unequal systems, systems that persist in a status quo because they're propped up by powerful forces in the world. And in this picture, one force, modern education, including, I would say, progressive international education, is not innocent or neutral. It's implicated and complicit in upholding the status quo, unless, that is, it works actively to unsettle and challenge the status quo in a complex system. And this is hard to do when you are ensconced within these systems and, in a way, effectively benefiting from them. But Atlantic, and I want to say at UWC more broadly, we understand that it's not in our interest and certainly not in our collective long interest to do that. The diagram on the right is what we're striving for at UWC Atlantic. We're striving for peace, unsurprisingly, but we interpret this to mean the collective liberation of all people from human-made systems of oppression. We strive for sustainability, which we take to mean the mutual thriving of people and planet as part of healthy ecosystems. And we recognize that these goals are interdependent, like Lee spoke about the interdependence of different systems at different levels. And these goals cannot possibly be achieved in isolation. So the role of education, and a little bit has already been said about this, in advancing and achieving these goals will be not to think and analyze about the problems, but really to feel, like Lee said, and also to practice taking good, grounded, principled action in what is necessarily and inevitably going to be politically contested spaces. Now, the second diagram comes to us from Nahid Bardai, who's the principal at UWC Atlantic, who's the initiator and enabler of this work at the college and in the movement, and who might be the person that some of you expected to hear address you today, except he stepped aside to enable me to speak to you today. And it's precisely this type of sharing power and access to platforms that's an example of what it takes to transform systems. And I can't think of a better partner to do this with. So as the movement enters its 7th decade, this is the direction of travel at UWC Atlantic. And I want to talk you today through what an education looks like that emanates from that triple intersection point. On the next slide, there is a snapshot of our work over the past 15 months, where we've designed and launched a new academic pathway to graduation. And correct me, Fidelis, but I think this might be the shortest curriculum development ramp for one of the most ambitious projects undertaken by the IB and in international education in maybe half a century. This collaboration with the IB allows us to award our students the full IB diploma and make sure that they graduate with all the benefits of a globally recognized credential while still creating space. In fact, the single biggest space in a student's academic program that is exam-free and still worth 14 IB points to dedicate to learning what it takes and looks like to transform whole systems. And we've decided at Atlantic that we want students to practice this on the food, energy, biodiversity, and migration systems, designing and carrying out systems interventions, both in their home contexts and in the local context of the college. So we're talking about place-based education and relational education as well. Over the course of their learning journey, they'll develop and demonstrate what the world of education calls difficult to assess competencies. And we can talk more about this in the Q&A. The program has several characteristics. The one I want to pick up today and build on what Lee has already shared with us is that it's intergenerational. And this really for us is an acknowledgement that young people alone do not have the structural power to shift systems. So we teach them and get them to practice building coalitions and building bridges. But the other sense in which this program is intergenerational is the acknowledgement that this is not just a course that you take in high school. This is work that you take on for life. And perhaps the most important lesson that we teach is that this is not what we call alone work. No amount of siloed innovation and heropreneurship or even service, as long as it's just addressing symptoms, will transform systems. And the opposite of alone work for us is relational work, is bridging work across disciplinary divides, but not only, also across differences in power differentials, to do the work that's otherwise impossible to do alone, because you can't shift power alone and you can't shift systems alone, and you sure cannot enact just and livable futures alone. We do it together, and we don't do it just once, but we do it repeatedly. It's a sustained practice. Talking about being together, if we can pull up the next slide, you'll see our students who I believe are together in a room at Atlantic, possibly having lunch and watching us. And these are the only 24 students in the world right now learning to transform systems in this way. They will become the first ever graduates anywhere of the systems transformation pathway. And when they graduate, I think they'll expect to find that they don't have to do this work alone. They will expect to find 60 generations of UWCers also having taken on this work for life, using their UWC education as a force to transform systems. And I want to stretch this a little bit and suggest that we shouldn't just be transforming the education system, although I know that's the topic of the webinar today. Education is important, surely important enough for us to make it our starting point, but we can't transform the education system in isolation from the financial system, the transportation system, the border securitization systems, emergent technology systems. You know where this is going. So we teach our students, but we also ask ourselves to build coalitions, to build common agendas for what we call coordinated collective action across systems. And I'd like to suggest that the UWC movement has a role to play beyond and outside education as well. So I'm thrilled to see us beginning to rally under this banner of systems transformation. And the question that arises, I think, more and more is, how can I get involved from all corners of the movement? And what people usually mean by this is get involved with learning innovation at the colleges. And what I'd like to say back at this is, you already are involved. How are you transforming your own systems that you're part of? How are you sharing power? How are you moving your systems towards more just futures? And also, who are you doing it with? And if it's not your UWC peers, then I really want to ask, why not? Because this is really our mandate and the truest meaning, the way that I understand it, of education as a force. And really, that's my greatest hope for the movement. And for these young people that you see on these slides who are trusting us and whom we've somehow convinced that transforming systems is, yes, difficult, but also that it can be made possible. And that's just our approach to how we do this work at Atlantic. And with that, I'd pass it back on to Vivian. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. Definitely sign me up for this. I do want to partner with you all. This is such exciting work. Can we then hear from Kathy next about her work going on at UWC Southeast Asia?
Yeah, thank you very much, Vivian, and good evening from Singapore to all of you, wherever you may be at different times of the day. Very similar to Maria and at Atlantic, we will have the same structure for an IB diploma with a course that we are designing quite specifically at SEA. We are in the middle of designing it right now. We have two of our teachers, one from each campus, supported by our head of curriculum and our directors of teaching and learning. And our first cohort will start our course next year. I wonder if we could have the first slide up. Thank you very much. That's great. I think what I'm going to do is just describe to you what we are planning the course to involve, the what, and then how we are planning to the teaching and learning, and also to describe the student experience that we want students to have as they start this course. So you can see here our course, which is focusing on leadership for change, has identified 5 key concepts that we believe will help equip students with the thinking tools and skills, the competencies and literacies, the empathy that people need to make these sorts of changes, to be effective change makers in whatever area they choose to make change. We also believe that these 5 key concepts are opportunities for students to recognize complexity of the issues in the world, to develop and use strategies, to plan for change, to partner for change, and to implement change. So these high-level concepts are underpinned by knowledge and skills and specific tools that we've identified that will help students to understand and engage with these concepts. And we are in the process of creating contexts and experiences for them to be able to scaffold their knowledge and their skills so that they can transfer them from small-scale projects to larger-scale projects, and from one context to another. So I wonder if we could have the next slide, please. What we've done is take those 5 large concepts and design a program which enables students to explore those concepts through 3 strands, which clearly come from our mission: intercultural understanding, the strand of peace building, and the strand of sustainability. So students are going to be able to explore some of the key questions around intercultural understanding, peace building, and sustainability through project-based experiences and pedagogies. In year 1, we are looking at students being scaffolded through smaller projects, which they will experience in each of those strands, within our community at SEA, within the Singapore community, and in collaboration with the partners that we are already engaged with. In year 2, the opportunity will be there for students to take deeper dives, perhaps into 1 or 2 of those particular strands in possibly more individualized projects. And I just want to shout out to many of you who may be in the audience tonight to thank you if you've signed up for our incubator events next week, where we've invited members of the UWC community to propose authentic projects and problems that our students might engage with, so that they're involved in real projects and complexities that you might suggest that fall under these 3 strands. Those incubators are on Monday and Saturday next week, and I think we have about 300 of you who've already said that you'll engage with us on this, so thank you very much for those. It's going to be an opportunity for us to have new perspectives and a wider range of projects that might be suggested to our students, who might then pick up different areas. The next slide, please. One of the things that's been really important for us in our approach when we're thinking about what the learning is going to look like is what the student experience will be. It's going to be, as you can see, there will be both a taught and a student inquiry experience for students. There will be collaborative guided projects as well as an extended individual engagement project. We really want to scaffold students' learning as they engage in real-world projects through their successes and their failures as they learn collaboratively together. We are looking to ensure that they have opportunities to have structured peer feedback for the work that they're doing, and supported by mentors, which might be a teacher, might be an alum who has an experience in this field, or experts within the Singapore community. We're looking as well at opportunities for students to have internships or vocational training that might support the particular projects that they're engaging with. And we can see that they may have links to other parts of the IB diploma with their extended essay, or even the work that they might be doing through CAS. I think for us, as we think about the approach that we've taken, we've looked at what the curriculum is and what the experience is that we want students to take away. because as Maria said, the one thing we really want is that this is something that is meaningful, purposeful for students, so that it's something that they continue and take on with them into lifelong learning from here. So that's where we are at the moment in terms of our planning for our cohort next year.
Such exciting work. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Cassie. And before I get to the audience questions, can I just follow up with Maria, because she said something that really piqued my interest. You made a point on something called difficult to assess competencies. So this is actually something I struggle with in this interdisciplinary curriculum redesign. How do we assess? What are some of the innovative ways to assess those difficult to assess competencies? I'd like to hear what your thinking is on this. I think you're muted.
Thank you, Vivian. I was inviting Kathy to also jump in and share how they're doing this in collaboration with the IB, because I think we share the same kind of orientation towards the assessment model as well. It might be helpful to maybe tell you what are some of these competencies, at least in our case, that we've designed our competency framework around. So for us, what it means for a student to graduate from the systems transformation program is that they've been able to develop and practice competencies relating to being able to take responsible action in what I called earlier politically contested spaces and bridge across differences in power differentials. The second kind of bucket of competencies is around systems thinking, and we've spoken quite a bit about that in this webinar. How did they demonstrate their ability to understand complex interdependencies, to design and influence interactions, to evaluate the impact of interventions in systems? And the last bucket for us, and as the tagline of the way that we're approaching systems transformation, is not for its own sake, but towards and in service of what we call just futures. What competencies are students developing relating to the ability to understand the forces that constrain and that determine possibilities, and to influence and shape narratives and build what we call imagination infrastructures. Now, how do you assess this? First of all, I'm just glad that the IB has the appetite to be in this challenge with us. And we found no substitute for witnessing the learning where it takes place. I think there's a risk and a danger, even with portfolio-based approaches, that what we are assessing is not the learning, but in a way, kind of light facsimiles of learning, a reflection piece that the students have written. And so we are assessing the same skill over and over again, their ability to articulate or reflect on their learning. But where is the meat of it? Where is the interaction and being able to see students in real relationship, in community? And so what is fantastic about this course, with being exam free, is that it brings our students in interaction with the teachers present as well. And we've been given 50% of the portfolio of assessment for this course to be internally assessed, because the teachers who are there are going to be the ones best placed to witness this and testify to it. And Kathy spoke about peer assessment, and for us it's a continuum of self-assessment, peer assessment, teacher assessment, and community assessment. If the work is world relevant, then how is the community that your work is meant to be serving? What kind of feedback are they giving about the effectiveness or appropriateness or impact of the intervention that you have conducted? So all of this to say, a very different approach to learning that is all about witnessing the learning where it takes place, getting students to articulate, self-assess and peer assess, and really take a community-based approach to celebrating and witnessing learning where it happens.
And if I could just add to that, I think when we're looking at the competencies for change makers, I think that those competencies fall, and under those fall certain knowledge and certain skills that competent change makers have. At SEA, we've identified some competencies: the competency of peace building, the competency of intercultural understanding, and the competency of sustainable development, to be able to develop something in a sustainable way. And underneath that sits certain knowledge and certain skills that students need to be able to be competent in those areas. And as Maria said, we also have an assessment model that is non-examined. 50% will be internally assessed and moderated by the IB, and 50% will be assessed, not examined, assessed by the IB. And those assessments will involve comparative case studies that students do, which will be able to show their competencies in terms of perhaps analytical thinking. They will also, one of the other assessments is a project proposal that they have to put together. That's a competency in and of itself to be a good change maker. And then in terms of the external assessment, the students have to do impact analysis report from the projects that they've been involved in. And the other part of that is a competency portfolio, where they're going to curate 4 articles or 4 pieces that represent the projects that they've been involved in and that they can speak to. So that's the kind of assessment model, and we're extremely excited by this work.
That's incredible. Just imagine the experience students go through to create each component of this. This is incredible. So we do have a few questions from the audience. The first question is for Kathy. At Southeast Asia, it's a full school. How do you envision this program being developed for the younger years down the line? Or is there some plan?
It's a really good question. And in fact, I would flip it the other way around. I think we've been doing this work in primary, middle school all along. And the students weren't able to take some of this work into the IB. We've also been developing our own grade 9 and 10 program. Up until now, we've been offering IGCSEs, but from 2025, our students in grade 9 and 10 will do a UWC SEA program. And that program has been designed very much to align with the kind of competencies that will be both in both the IB as it is right now and this new course. So actually, I think we're quite well set up. And in a strange sort of a way, maybe the IB pilot that we're doing is at the end of work that we've been doing from K to 10 already. So it feels like a culmination of work that we've been doing for some time in a through school.
Wow, so that's great to hear. So there's already existing work that's prepping students up to this point.
Yes, we have a K-12 curriculum that we've written ourselves. Yeah. And those competencies that I was talking around about peace building, sustainability, and intercultural understanding, those things are already embedded and threaded through the K-10 curriculum. So actually this new pilot has kind of freed us up to really embed that learning now in grade 11 and 12 in the IB years.
Great to hear. Well, next question, I guess both of you could take this one as well. How are you engaging with industry practitioners in the design and delivery of this innovative program?
Do you want me to start, Maria? We have had an innovation program at SEA for quite some time, and we already have been engaged again right through our middle school and into the high school with industry within Singapore already for quite some time. But in terms of this particular program, one of the unique parts of this is our invitation to the UWC community to join us through the incubator event so that we can actually extend those partnerships. We're really looking forward to being able to work with UWC alumni who might have projects that they would really like to engage with us in. Actually, some of our own alumni are already working with us on some of these sorts of projects. So we're looking to work in particular in Singapore, ideally, because that's our local community. But we'll also look beyond that. Maria, I wonder if you want to pick up from there.
Maybe just the thing that I would add to that, very similar, but in our case, we're specifically not necessarily looking to engage with thought or practice leaders or industry, but looking for our students to connect with people, organizations, and collectives already advancing systems transformations within the 4 impact areas that we're looking at. So whether that is an organization or a company that is already leading and in some way advancing systemic transformation within the food systems, that is who we're interested in engaging with in various contexts, but especially in Wales and the context that is local to the college. So if anyone on the call happens to be actively engaged in transforming the systems that we have identified as our focus impact areas, an open invitation to engage.
Excellent opportunity. Well, the next question is also for both of you. And this question comes directly from UWC USA. So at UWC USA, we try to make peace and sustainability intrinsically connected, because there's no peace without sustainability and no sustainability without peace. How can we deliver the UWC mission holistically in that way? Very thoughtful.
I mean, I can go, and I feel like I opened my presentation with this, with our double Venn diagrams. Really, we see, and we agree, I think everyone at UWC, about the interconnected causes of, like I said, ecological and social harm. But then I think really to understand that we have to advance both of these goals simultaneously and in tandem, and that their success is interrelated. Sometimes maybe unhelpfully, and because I participate in peace-oriented groups within the movement and sustainability-oriented groups, there's almost a rivalry about which one is taking up more space, or seems to be more relevant in the movement, or is better resourced. And I think for each school to figure out how to bring these two together, because whoever asked that question from USA, absolutely right, and we have to have that holistic approach. And I think where that comes from is the source and the root cause of the challenges that we see in both realms. They're the same forces at play, and if we advance one, we advance the other, and we would benefit from working together and not siloing that work not at UWC to begin with. Kathy?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think sometimes some work is focused perhaps more in one area, but piecework leads to sustainable future, and sustainable work leads to a peaceful future. I mean, they are absolutely intertwined, but perhaps at any one point, one might be focusing a little bit more in one area than the other, but it's that chicken and egg cause and effect that they're totally interrelated.
Yes, definitely. Well, I guess we'll do one last question. So this question asks, what are the opportunities for students in terms of higher education after taking this path, especially for those who do not have vocational opportunities in their home country?
Shall I start, Maria? We've certainly spoken with lots of universities about this. And I have to say, I'm going to speak to my own assumption. I had assumptions that perhaps British universities might be more questioning of this option. But actually, the A-levels, I hadn't realized, but the A-levels have had an extended project for quite some time. And so universities actually seem extremely excited about the possibility. I've also spoken to a number of universities and a professor at the local NUS university just this week who's talking about the shifts in universities towards more and more interdisciplinary learning as well. And so I think there's a shift in business, in universities, and in schools to recognize how important this approach to learning is, which is very exciting. And I don't see any barrier to tertiary or university education through this course.
Not really. Just to add to that really briefly, I think we must have spoken to over 50 universities by now. We've received nothing but enthusiastic response, and I think these graduates are going to be in high demand, and I am with gratitude to the IB Recognition Office for working overtime to make sure that we have de-risked this for the students who are going to be the first ones to participate in this innovation. But I do want to echo what Lee said earlier. I think, yes, the university pathways are open, but the whole point of this education is that the graduates are ready to transform systems now, and I think in some ways are we underestimating their wisdom and their knowledge and skill and experience by saying you need to get a degree and a postgraduate degree before you ever attempt to make real change in the world. And I think they're already ready, and with this program under their belt, for sure. I do want to add one last thing, though, in terms of universities and the way that this program is articulated. The one way that the incentives are stacked against us, even when the IB has untied our hands to do things that we've never been able to do before, like this program allows a student to take 2 arts group 6 subjects. And we see that none of our students have chosen to do that, because the incentives by the university admission system is to have math and a language and sciences as admissions requirements criteria. So even as we work to make enabling constraints and open up possibilities within education, this is where we have to work together with universities to shift this, because if those incentives around admissions are stacked against us, these are not free choices that our students have. So that gives you a sense of the work that is still ahead of us.
That is such a great point. Thank you. And I resonate with that from the higher ed perspective. There needs to be this acknowledgement of holistic education. And yes, thank you. Thank you for doing the hard work. Well, it looks like we're coming close to the end of our time. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how students are transformed through this set of new curriculum in the UWC schools. And I also want to see how individual schools can collaborate with other schools and external partners and industrial partners to broaden the impact in this type of education. And I can speak as a UWC alum. I'm just super proud right now that we are actually leading this innovative effort, and we're asking the tough questions, and we're doing the hard work. And this is really going to benefit so many students in the future. So we acknowledge that we may not get it 100% right all in one shot, but I think that this is hopefully some initiatives that's going to lead us on the right path towards this paradigm shift that we're speaking of today. So finally, those of us that are in the US are getting ready for our turkey feast, and we're celebrating Thanksgiving today. So I want to express my gratitude for our panelists and everyone to join us to engage in this important conversation. I hope you all are as excited as I am and are eager to dive into more discussions and more dialogues in the coming months as a community to help shape the future of UWC education. Thank you so much. And I will pass the stage back to Radha. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. All that is left now to do is to extend our heartfelt thanks and gratitude to all the panelists and to you, the attendees. Thank you so much for your participation. We have much to think about as we go forward. We've heard about being global. We've heard about silo busting. We've been asked to think about how we advance systems thinking in the curriculum, moving students from anxiety to ambition. We've also been asked to think about whether education is still serving the purpose of evolving our lives. We had a wonderful quote from an attendee: every job is a climate job. And we were reassured that we can indeed influence the direction of travel in terms of shaping assessment. From Maria and Kathy, we heard about the power of coordinated collective action and that transforming systems is possible. and that students can now plan, partner, and implement change for just futures. So take note of the following dates and sessions so that we can continue to talk. 7th December for a pre-Congress session, 11th January, 25th January, and then the final plenary before heading to Congress, which is on the 8th of February. We want to encourage you to visit the UWC Hub and engage with each other so that when we arrive in Phuket, either online or in person, we meet as friends who have spent a few months talking about education as a force. Thank you so much and stay well.